Well, it is an honor and joy to introduce our speaker for the evening. Dave McIntyre began attending Ada Bible Church shortly after moving to Grand Rapids in 2013, and he is one of our own and is actually part of a men's group that meets out of the Kentwood campus. Dave grew up in Pennsylvania, hunting, fishing, trapping, and hiking in the Appalachian Mountains, where he learned a love of wilderness survival and bushcraft. In 1999, he went to Brazil as a church planting missionary, where he founded a wilderness ministry and co-founded the Bushmaster Wilderness Survival School. In 2015, Dave was invited to participate as one of 10 contestants on season 2 of the History Channel survival series, Alone. The contestants dropped off alone in the wilderness of Vancouver Island, BC. 10 tools, no food, and no contact with the outside world. They had to survive living off the land, filming themselves each and every day. And after 66 days of solo survival, Dave was the last man standing to win Alone Season 2. He currently resides in Kentwood, where he is a writer, public speaker, wilderness survival instructor, and maybe most importantly, he's dad. Let's welcome tonight to the stage, Dave McIntyre.
Thank you. It makes me sound so much cooler than I actually am. It's embarrassing to get up here now and talk to you guys. There is a verse of scripture I've always wanted to share at a wild game dinner. And how many hunters do we have here? Let's see, raise your hands. Hunters? I can't really see you guys. You know that, right? Oh, there you go. How many fishermen we got out here? How many wilderness survival people do we have? Nobody. Come on. I'm like the only guy here that eats grubs and stuff. Anyway, Acts chapter 10. This is a great verse. Peter falls into a trance. He's having a vision. He saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet being let down to the earth by its four corners. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Isn't that great for sport? I don't care who you are, I don't care what you do. That verse right there, that just fires my rockets. Because if I had to sum up my experience on Vancouver Island right there, get up, David, kill and eat. That's what it's all about, wilderness survival. You know, this is a big mountaintop experience for me, to actually be on the show and to actually win it. I never thought I was going to win the show. I thought I was going to come out of there on a backboard. And when it was all done, after the show was aired in July, Alan Kay, the winner of season 1, he called me up on the phone, and he's from down south. He says, "Well, Mac, no one's ever going to be able to cancel your man card." And I'm like, there is something about the premise of this show. The whole idea is they take 10 of us, they drop us off in the middle of nowhere on the north end of Vancouver Island. They call it the rain coast. It gets 12 feet of rain a year out there. The average winter temperature, it's not like inland Canada that gets like super cold. It'll be like 35 degrees, 36, 35 degrees, hovering and raining. Now, how many of you guys like to hunt in that kind of weather? Would you go fishing in 33 degrees and raining? I'd rather have 32 degrees and snowing, personally. You know, it's a brutal place. It has the highest concentration of cougars and black bears in North America. It's a hard place to be. And there's something about the premise of the show. I think it appeals to men that we look at the challenge like that, and it sparks something about in our fantasy life that we all want to be the guy that can go out and just face our challenges all by ourselves. You know, whatever life is handing to us, we want to be able to face these things on our own. And it's very easy and very wrong to cast me in that light because I spent 66 days living by myself on Vancouver Island. I was never alone out there. Not for 1 second. Now, don't get me wrong, the show is exactly what they say it is. We were out there all by ourselves filming it, and there's no outside help, but there was an inside help. And that's the real story I want to talk about, and also how this church was instrumental in my life in order to get me to the point where I could actually do a thing like that. In order to tell the full story and put the big win of 66 days and winning season 2 of Alone, in order to put that into context, I've got to back you up. Okay, I got to give you, take you back to the beginning. I grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, hunting, fishing, trapping, crazy about American Indians from the get-go. Where we lived in Pennsylvania had been the site of a Lenni Lenape village, and arrowheads would turn up in the garden, and that kind of thing. I was just crazy about American Indians. And I could have gone either way. We had the development side, and then behind our house was all forest. And I lived in that forest. I would come home from school, I'd get my Ruger single six, I'd strap on my gun belt, I'd go out there and shoot groundhogs. Every day, just off in the woods, doing something. And other kids in my neighborhood, were into sports and things like that. I was into that forest. And I basically lived out there. When I was 16, right before my 16th birthday, 2 things happened. 2 major changes. The first is that I learned some things about Christianity which had been really fuzzy up until that point. I was raised in a Presbyterian church and gone to church until I was about 14 years old. I got in a fist fight at church and decided that was enough for me. I won the fight, but it was ugly, and I didn't, I figured, if that's all church is going to be, I don't need it. And I learned some things. I went to a Christian camp in Colorado, and I learned some things, that Jesus Christ was God. I had never, really? All those years in church, I never made that connection, that Jesus was God, that he was the creator, that he made me with a purpose. There was a reason why I existed on this planet. I was an accident. My parents were very vocal about that. When I was a kid, that I was an unintended consequence. And I thought, what purpose is there for my life? Well, I realized that, okay, if Jesus was, I remember thinking, okay, Jesus dies on a cross, big deal. The Romans killed how many people on crosses? What makes this guy any different? Oh, but he was God. Okay, he was sinless. He was up there for me. He rose from the dead. And these things finally clicked, and I realized something, that I believed that. I believe that to be true. And if you believe that to be true, it demands a response from you. You can't just say, you can't come to that realization that these things are true and be unaffected by it, or it demanded a response from me. And I remember at 16 years old praying, I said, Lord, I am a hopeless sinner. For 16 years now, I've just made a mess out of my life. It's time for you to come into my life and see what you can make out of it. That was 16. The other thing that happened at 16 years old is I got totally into wilderness survival. Now that came about because my brother and I would go out, kind of a rough home situation, and a lot of fighting going on and things like that. And we had a cabin up in the mountains. And rather than going to the cabin, my brother and I would say, hey, just drop us off on the mountain. And you guys go into the cabin, pick us up on the way back. And we spent every weekend out on the Appalachian Mountains, basically making a lot of mistakes and getting our heads handed to us by the weather. And wilderness survival to me became the reason I would go to the bush. I'd go out to the woods, I'd go out to the mountains in order to solve these problems. It just intrigued me, is how do you confront a wilderness survival scenario? What happens if it all goes wrong? Because it had gone wrong so many times. With my brother and I, there's always something we forgot, always something we were not prepared for. I started studying this and started really getting into that. Fast forward a little bit, I'm in college. I started dating a girl who had been a missionary kid in Brazil. And the first year we were married, I decided we were going to go down to Brazil, and my first teaching assignment was teaching missionary kids in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Did that for 2 years. That was 1990 to 1992. Originally, it was a one-year assignment. We were going to go down for 1 year, and I thought, this is a chance for me to learn this other side of my wife, this whole other culture that she had. And after that year was up, I was ready to come home. And there were some deer that had not been shot in Pennsylvania and things, and I was, you can do anything for a year. You can go to prison for a year. You can handle it, but at the end of that year, they asked us, we're going to be closing the school in a year, and we would like you guys to stay. Would you pray about staying? And I'm like, whenever someone asks you that, will you pray about it? You already know the answer, right? So we prayed about it, and God's like, yeah, stay. So we stayed for that second year. And it was in that year that my daughter was born. Our first daughter was born in Brazil. It was in that year that I started to speak Portuguese. And I learned, I wasn't fluent, but I was definitely conversant by the time we left. And it was a life-changing experience for me. We left there, I came back to the States, I was teaching in a Christian school in Pennsylvania, and I could not get Brazil out of my mind. I just couldn't get Brazil out of my mind. In 1994, we went down for the summer. We sublet our apartment, went down to Brazil for the summer, and it was like coming home. To me, it was where I wanted to be. And I realized that God was calling me into missions in Brazil. Now, Belo Horizonte, you've heard of the nation of Finland, right? Do you know the population of Finland? There's 5.5 million people in Finland. You ever heard of Belo Horizonte, Brazil? Nobody. It's the third largest city in Brazil. No one's ever heard of it. 5.5 million people in that city. It's a big place. And it's a very urban place. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be going down to this city, and I'm going to be a church planting missionary in this urban sprawl, and I'm giving up the wilderness. I mean, the wilderness is in my blood. I love being in the wilderness. I love being in those just out of contact with people and off in the middle of nowhere. And I decided, okay, Lord, you're going to send me down to Brazil, and I'm going to have to give up the wilderness in order to do this. So necessitated a career change. I did an internship at a Baptist church for 2 years, became an ordained Baptist pastor. We spent 2 years raising support to do our work in Brazil, doing the Gypsies for Jesus thing, traveling to over 80 churches, presenting our work. And finally, in 1999, with a second baby in tow, 3 months old, we arrived in Belo Horizonte, Brazil as church planting missionaries. And I loved it and hated it. Because here, I loved the work. I loved working doing my internship at a church downtown, but I was surrounded by cement and surrounded by diesel fumes, and I had to get out of the city. And one day, my father-in-law at the time, he says, Mac, we need to get out. You need to get out of the city. We're going to drive around. We're going to go off in the country and check some things out. So we started driving around and went way, way out of the city. And we found a place where in the lowland, it was jungle. Okay, when you go down in Minas Gerais, Brazil, central Brazil, when you go into lower elevations where all the rain is collecting, it turns into jungle. And in the mid elevations, it's like a scrubland called Cerrado, which is like, it's almost like desert. And then above that were mountains that went up to 6,000 feet. And I found an area of 140 square kilometers of just prime bush, wilderness. And it was completely untouched. It would be like discovering Yellowstone before the U.S. Parks Department got a hold of it. This was just an amazing, amazing place. And this was my refuge. This was the place that God provided for me just to get out of the city every once in a while and go out there. So I started going out there and taking pictures. And I'd come back and I'd show my kids at the youth group, hey, Pastor Mac, what did you do? Where did you go this week? I said, I was out, at the Waimea Forest. It's the place's name. And I show them the pictures, and they're like, oh man, this is so cool. You've got to take us out there. You've got to show us this, this place. So I'm like, okay, guys, I'll take you out. I will show you. Do you got those pictures? Can we roll those? This is the Per Ardua Wilderness Ministry. I'm not going to take time to explain each photo, but you get an idea what it's like. The first time I took these guys out, it was an unmitigated disaster. They had never been off the asphalt in their lives. They had no skills whatsoever. I made all the fires. I made all the, set up all the tents. I did everything for these guys. And they loved it. And they had a great time, but they were dangerous. I mean, they would do things that were just stupid, just boneheaded mistakes, and I was a nervous wreck the whole time. I had like 8 guys, it was too many guys. I was a nervous wreck. So the next time, they're like, oh, we got to do this again. And I said, okay, the next time we do this, I'll take you out there. I'm going to teach you basic wilderness survival skills. And that's that. So I took them out. I took a bunch of guys out there. The first thing I said to them, I said, guys, look around. Do you see your mother here? No, I am not your mother. I will do the thing. I will explain what I'm doing. You can ask questions about what I'm doing. And the very next time the thing has to be done, you will be doing it. Are we clear on this? And a light bulb goes off in my head. That's exactly what I'm here to do as a missionary. I am not here to do for them what they can do for themselves. I'm here to teach them to do for themselves what they can do. I am to reproduce myself into them. And it was just this light bulb moment for me in my ministry that, wow, that God has given me this love for the wilderness. He's given me a love for the Brazilian people. He's brought all these things together in a way that only he could. And here I thought I was giving up the wilderness, where he's now installed me in this wilderness ministry and given me this beautiful ministry. Basically, the Per Ardua Wilderness Ministry was using guided wilderness survival training in the jungle as a springboard for spiritual growth and leadership training. Most of the guys that I would take out were church leadership groups. They're members of the same church, and I would take them out. Sometimes it would be groups of pastors I would take out and do this. But if you get the same 5 guys together 10 years later who've been through Per Ardua, that's all they talk about. I've seen it again and again. You get the guys, oh man, remember that? They just ate it up. It was fantastic. As a youth pastor in Brazil, it was the highlight of my ministry down there. I loved it. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I loved my time in Brazil. Don't get me wrong. There were some horrific things that happened to us as a family during this time. Have you heard people say this bumper sticker theology that God will never give you more than you can handle? How many of you guys have heard someone say that? Okay, I want to ask you, how many of you guys have said that yourselves? It's a lie. It's a bold face. It's a load of crap. God will never give you more than you can handle. Really? Is that true? I contend that it is not true at all. I can show you from Scripture that it's not true. Should have marked those verses. 2 Corinthians. See, now I'm off my script here. Second Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. That's the Apostle Paul talking there. We know the kind of things that Paul went through, the worst of which was being stoned to death in Lystra. He didn't die, but they stopped throwing rocks at the man when they were convinced that he was dead. Yeah, God will never give you more than you can handle. Really? You could handle that? I couldn't. I could not handle being stoned to death. I think that would be a really, really bad day. You know? And that's what he's talking about here. We are under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Have you ever faced a problem where you despaired of life itself? Where you're literally saying, this is the end. There's no way I can go on from this place. Your personal apocalypse. The end for you. The end for me came in Brazil, a few years after all these different events. We had been through as a family some horrific circumstances. And 2012, my wife of 25 years decided that we were going to get a divorce. Guys, I was a Baptist pastor. We don't do that. I didn't believe in divorce. Still don't believe in divorce, but I believe I'm divorced. She decided we were going to get a divorce. Don't be hard on her. There's an awful lot going on, and this is the way that she decided to handle it. And no, I never cheated on my wife. That was not the reason. All of a sudden, I mean, at this point in my life, everything that I had been working, through Bible college, the language school. It took me about 10 years to become qualified to be a missionary in Brazil. And then all those years of ministry, and I loved it, and it was great. It was hard. It was fulfilling. It was all that. And all of a sudden, it was over. Now, we had never taken a vacation. I remember we mentioned the word vacation around my son, Daniel. He didn't know what the word meant. Vacation? What do you mean? He was about 10, 12 years old. He never heard that word, vacation. We had all this accumulated vacation time, so we came here to Michigan. My wife's parents live here in Michigan, and she wanted to move here. And if I wanted to see my kids, I would have to be in Michigan too. So we rented a house up in Falmouth. And I was up there in this house in Falmouth and, facing the end of my marriage, the end of my career, the end of everything I've built in my life, in my entire adult life is now gone. And someone gave me a book, The Land Between, written by Jeff Mannion, who is the pastor of this church. And I remember in that book, there's a section, and it says all the different things that can put you into the land between, the in between, the one thing and the next thing. You're in this, suspended animation, this limbo land of, the old life is over, the new life hasn't begun, and I'm in this land between. And there's this list of things, and almost every one of them I qualified for. A house that won't sell, chronic health issues, the loss of a marriage, the loss of a job, the loss, it was all there. I remember just weeping through that thing. But I read the book, and it helped me quite a bit. And we were going to move down here. I moved down to Grand Rapids and look for a job. And I remember flipping that book over and thinking, oh, wow, this guy's church is in Grand Rapids. I should check it out. Now, understand, at this point, I had some spiritual third-degree burns from different organizations. And things were not handled well, always. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder when it came to church. I didn't want to go to church. I'm here, I'm a pastor, and I just didn't want to be involved in organized Christianity anymore. I was done with it. And I put it off, and I put it off, and I put it off. I was supposed to go to this church, and I made this commitment to myself. Yes, I will go to this church. I will check this church out. They have a branch right there in a campus right there in Kentwood where I live. I put it off until finally it just kind of I got to this point where, okay, I have to go to this church. So I get up one Sunday morning. I figure I'm just going to go in, slip in the back. I'll sit down. I'll watch, see what's going on, and then I'll leave. And I'll be able to, check this one off my list. Okay, I made a commitment to do this. I did it. Now I'm done. So I go in, and Pastor Jeff, he says, well, we're starting a new series today and rebuilding a life. Really? I'm sitting there. I'm no joke, guys. I'm sitting in it thinking, no way. Rebuilding a life. And I'm here at the first one. It's not like concluding it. I'm like, all right, Lord. The book was great. The church looks great. Rebuilding a life. That's exactly what I need. So I decided to stay. And I remember as a pastor, I talked to Ben. Is Ben Vaught here? Is Ben here? There he is. I remember talking to him over at the Kentwood campus, and I'm spilling my guts. I'm telling him the whole story, all the dirty story, the horrible things that had happened. And I can see Ben, he's just sitting there like, And I recognize the look in his eyes as a pastor. It's like that look you get where you're just saying, "Guy, keep talking, because when you stop, I have no idea what I'm going to say." You know? And Ben's like, I can just see him. I mean, he can tell you that it's a horrific story. And I realized I could not do this on my own. I came to Grand Rapids. I knew two guys. I had a friend of mine that lived in Zeeland from college, and Gene Boyd, who was here, very good friend of mine. You know, there's friends that would help you hide a body. This is a guy who you'd swap kidneys with. Seriously, I mean that. My Bible study guys would help me hide a body. Yeah. They wouldn't ask too many questions. What happens in Bible study stays in Bible study. That's right. I couldn't do it alone. So that there was man night. Man night. Okay, I like that. You know why? Because there's food. It's not man night, it's food night, right? I don't have to eat my own cooking if I go to man night. So I went to man night. I thought, this is pretty good. I mean, these guys are decent. You hear a good testimony and things. And then they had group launch, where you get together with a bunch of guys sitting around a table and you form a small group. And I thought, I need this. I was a small group pastor in Brazil. I instituted the whole program of small groups at our church. I grew our youth group from 12 kids to 85 using small groups. I know the concept. It's a great concept. And I just had to get over myself. Because we want, when you go through a divorce or you lose a career or you lose it, it feels like and looks like failure. And as men, we don't want to be seen as failures. We want to put out this image of who we are and be seen as that guy who is respectable and respected in this area. And I told my son, Dan, every man has that one thing that he does that's really good at. You got to find your one thing. That's people will know you as the guy that's able to do that thing. And that's kind of where we get as men. We don't want to admit that we have failings. We don't want to admit that awesome guy that we want everyone to know us as. There's two images. There's the person we want people to see, and there's the person that we know who we are. And we have those feelings, and we hide those things, and we don't want to talk about them. We don't want other people to know about them. And you've all got them. It's like a belly button, everyone's got one. You've got those things in your life you're not proud of. You got those things in your life where you consistently screw up. And you got those other areas in your life where you're doing great and doing well. And I needed a group of guys where I could just say, this is where I'm at in all this. Because I was not a happy camper. My life was over. Everything I'd ever built in my life. I'm living by myself in a single bedroom apartment. I had a job. I was inspecting foreclosed homes. Okay, I'd go from one empty house to the next. It was like living after the zombie apocalypse. And I would photograph. My boss is great. I mean, a lot of these houses have like crackheads and stuff and, squatters and all. You never know what you're going to find in these houses that were basically abandoned. So he says, Dave, the guy was from Georgia, Dave, if they catch you carrying a gun on this job, they're going to fire you immediately. All right. He says, that said, they're never going to ask you if you carry a gun on this job. Got it. Don't ask, don't tell, right? In a way, the job was great. In other ways, I mean, it would have been great if it didn't include like 2 hours of off the clock computer time every night. But after about 1.5 years of that, I lost my job. I mean, just as I'm getting myself back, I'm now accepting the fact that I'm divorced. I'm living by myself. I see my kids every other weekend. And all of a sudden I lose my job. Now I got nothing. I'm thinking, man, when is this going to end? When are these problems just going to go away? And at that time, Gene, my friend, he gave me a book, What Color is Your Parachute? And it's this fierce personal inventory where you go through this thing and you outline and describe every area of your life, every aspect of your life. And I got this picture and I was just so discouraged. It's like, what do I like to do? I'm a wilderness survival instructor. I like to make videos in the wilderness. You know, who would hire this guy? You know, thinking I'm describing this life which has now ended. Who in the world would hire this guy? And then one day I get this Facebook message, you look like a great candidate for our show. Could you apply? I'm thinking, okay, what is this? I had done a screen test with the Discovery Channel down in Brazil once and got right up to they were going to, it came between me and another guy to host this show down there, and they chose the other guy. Okay, that's the way it goes. But I thought, you know what, I'm not doing anything right now, why not? And I checked out the show. Anywhere in the world. They didn't say Vancouver Island. They said anywhere in the world, we will take you, we will drop you off totally alone. You will film it yourself. There's no producer, no sound crew, no crew whatsoever, no outside help, no contact with the outside world. It may last up to a year. I'm looking at $500,000 top prize. Yeah, I can do that. I mean, at this point in life, guys, I got nothing. You know what I'm saying? And this is like a Hail Mary pass at the rest of my life. I mean, yeah, I mean, the wilderness does not intimidate me. And so I applied for the show, went right through the casting process. It comes down to, they invited me to, I had a fever all last night. My lungs are filled up with junk, so. Went right through the casting process. They invited me to boot camp in August out in New York State. They took 20 people out to boot camp. I'm thinking, okay, 20 people at boot camp, they're gonna take 10 of them for the show. All I gotta do is beat half the people here. Then I started hearing who they are. Have guys like Jose, who was Spanish Foreign Legion Special Forces. This guy looks like he stepped out of a Jack London book, all right? We're at a hotel in Mahwah, New Jersey, Suffern, New York, right across from Mahwah. And this guy's walking around. He's got this big old curved knife, you know, right in the front. I'm like, thank you. Give my girlfriend a hand. Guys, I hit the relationship jackpot. Okay, right here. The other people involved, Justin, Army sniper. Dr. Nicola Pellion runs safaris in Africa and has a master's in marine biology from the Pacific Northwest. And these are people, Mike Lowe, who was a Air Force SEER instructor. Not somebody who went through the SEER school, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. He was one of their instructors. Randy Champagne, an instructor at a major school out west. I'm thinking, hey, I'm the missionary guy. You know what I mean? I'm like, I taught kids Bible in Brazil, you know? I felt like this all. The more they explain the show, you know, when you go to the boot camp, you sign all the non-disclosure agreements and all that stuff, and then they open up the whole thing, they explain everything. And the more I heard about this thing, I'm like, Lord, if you do not want me to go on this show, do not let them offer me a slot at it. You gotta just pull back and let me fail. I went through the boot camp thing. I was the only one at boot camp that did all of the tasks in the time allotted. And the very first one was to make a bow drill fire. They gave us a knife and a piece of string. They said, go make a fire, you know? And I was the only one that got it done in the time. And all of a sudden, I'm the guy to watch. I'm the guy to beat, you know? And we went through all the different tasks that we had to do and things, and psychological evaluation, drug tests, all kinds of different interviews and things. And then when they're all done, they don't tell you if you got on the show. So about a week later, they requested another Skype interview, and I met them on Skype, and there's all the producers from A&E Network and Left Field Pictures. And they're like, okay, David, just explain to us one more time why you want to be on the show. And I did it, and they said, that's exactly what we wanted to hear. We're offering you a position as one of the 10 contestants on Alone. Ooh, it got real then. And at this point, I knew I was going back to Vancouver Island, and I'm a jungle guy. I mean, I've got 15 years of teaching jungle survival. This is a totally different kind of jungle. This is not the same kind of environment. I'd never been to the Pacific Northwest in my entire life. So I studied and studied. At the time, I was lifting, I was running, and I was eating like a horse because I wanted to go out there heavy in every way. I mean, go out there with as much muscle mass as I possibly could have and as much body fat, because that's what you're going to be living off of for, until you can crack the food code. We had a week-long orientation up on Vancouver Island before we left, where they gave us extra camera training, explained to us the archaeological significance of that we were on Indian land up there, a reservation. And We had to be able to recognize what's an artifact, what's not to disturb things or to mark them with the GPS if we found anything. Canadian Fish and Game laws, all this other stuff, wham, bam, and then all of a sudden, it's the morning of. Tomorrow morning, we are going to drop off in the bush and for an indeterminate amount of time. So that night, I did not sleep at all the night before. I got up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and they wouldn't let me take my Bible. So I decided, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to read my Bible. And it just so happens, this Bible right here, I set it down on the bed, and when I looked over at it, it was open up to Isaiah chapter 40. Don't put that verse up yet, okay? I know I had memorized the end of Isaiah chapter 40 many, many years ago, but I'm kind of a dullard when it comes to references. I remember verses, but I don't remember the references. And so I started reading Isaiah chapter 40, the whole chapter. And Isaiah chapter 40 ends like this. Go ahead and put the Isaiah. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even the youth grow tired and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And guys, when I read that, I wept. I'm like, okay, Lord, that's what you're telling me? This is the message you want to leave with me, and when I have to close this Bible and put it away and go out there into the bush. This is the message. That's the last thing you're going to tell me from Scripture before I go out there, is that if I put my hope in you and trust in you, that I will soar like an eagle, that I will run and not grow weary. Because I've done this wilderness survival thing before. I have, when you stop eating, certain things happen. I mean, your body is a flex fuel system. You know that, right? You run on carbs normally, which makes glucose and glycogen and all that whole system. When you shut that off, when you stop eating carbs, your body starts to break down proteins into ketone bodies. It's called ketosis. It's your body's other way of keeping you alive. Basically, what happens is your body starts to eat itself. And that's the whole idea behind weight loss, is you're consuming those stores that are in your body. And at that point, I weigh 195 pounds. It was exactly the same weight that I left to go into the bush. I was at this weight, more muscle mass at that time. I still haven't recovered my muscle mass. But yeah, that takes work, right? You got to actually lift heavy objects to get that back, rather than just eat. I took that verse, and I actually took my rain jacket off, and I wrote that verse in the hood of my rain jacket. Because I wanted that guarding my heart and my mind. I wanted that right here, okay? So I would be able to remember God's promise. Now, wilderness survival, the basics of wilderness survival, what's it all about? Okay, there's really very, very few disciplines in the wilderness survival. Shelter, fire, water, signals, navigation, food gathering, and medical. Okay, with shelter, fire, and water, you can make a stable camp. If I have shelter, fire, and water, I'm camping. If I have a roof over my head, a fire in front of me, and a boiling pot of water, that's called camping. You're not in a survival situation, you're just camping. And that's where you want to get. That creates stability. Signals allow you to attract attention to yourself. Navigation allows you to self-rescue by getting yourself out of the bush. And of course, food gathering, that is something which most of the time when people say, oh no, we're in a survival situation, what are we going to eat? You're going to eat you. You can go 72 hours without eating anything. It's not that bad. You don't have to eat. The rule of threes is a very general rule. It says you can survive 3 minutes without air or 3 minutes of heavy bleeding, 3 hours of exposure to extreme heat or extreme cold, generally, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Food is the least of your concern in a wilderness survival situation. You can do it totally on the reserves that you have in your body, just on board. Some of you guys last a long time, couldn't you? I mean, some of you guys, I don't know, if you're on the island, I'll be eyeing you up like, if we got to eat somebody, might as well be him. You know, it's good to be lean and stringy in those, cannibalistic situations. Shelter, fire, water, signals, navigation, and food. On alone, the whole premise is you're going to go out there and you're going to stay as long as you possibly can. Now, they gave us a satellite phone, which we could call if we were injured or decided to leave, we could use that. We had a GPS tracker, which had a red button that we could press, and that would activate the rescue immediately. They would come. That's like, okay, you have a broken bone. You fell off a cliff or something like that. Press the red button. People call it the tap out button. It's not. Okay, that thing activates, the rescue apparatus. They will come and get you. They took our safety very seriously. We had a bear spray, no gun. In fact, go ahead and run that first video. I'll show you my 10 items and give an idea what the show looks like. For my adventure on Vancouver Island, I'm taking 10 items, and the number one and number 2 item that I have here are the bivy bag and the sleeping bag. The bivy is a U.S. Army issue Gore-Tex cover, which basically just keeps my bag dry. And then this is a 0-degree mummy bag, so those two work together. My third item is a bushcraft knife. You can't survive without a knife, and I wanted one that was made in stainless steel. It has a Scandinavian grind, extremely sharp. My fourth item is a ferro rod for making fire. It's just a great tool that'll continually make fire in this kind of an environment. My next item is my axe. This is a cruiser length axe. It's about as long as my arm. It's a 2-pound head on there. It's not a very heavy axe. So the axe is just an essential tool for splitting wood. And along with the axe, I'm taking a folding saw. And this one has a straight blade. The straight blade is better for doing carpentry work and for shelter building. It allows you to do precise and accurate cuts. It's just a very lightweight, very efficient saw. For cooking, I'm taking a 2-quart pot with a lid, nothing really fancy about it. Well, I have 270 yards of 50-pound test and 30 yards of 100-pound test line, plus 25 hooks, and I went with circle hooks because the fish stay hooked on them better on a trot line or a long line. The other passive fishing method I'm taking with me is a gill net. It's basically out there working for you, catching fish when you're off doing other things. The last item that I brought is 5 pounds of emergency rations. This is pemmican. It looks and tastes like dog food. There's nothing exciting about pemmican other than it's made out of fat and dried meat. So it's extremely high calorie, everything I'm going to be craving out there. I expect to find a real sense of freedom. I've experienced that kind of freedom before in the wilderness. That's really what I'm looking forward to experiencing again. I wouldn't do this for the money. That's not enough of a motivation. There's a lot of things that you could offer me $500,000 for that I would have no interest in whatsoever. I really do believe that my life happens on purpose. I do have a relationship with God. I believe that He calls me into things, and He's called me into this, and He has His purposes. I am home. This is beautiful. This place, this beach is absolutely stunning. I see all kinds of potential. I've got a lot of work to do today. It is supposed to rain tonight and for the rest of the week, so I've got to get moved into this forest, find some place to sleep, get my tarp set up. Now let's get to work. Okay, let's get to work. Now, what does that look like? What do you have to do? What are your priorities? For me, when I got there, I get off that boat and they say, okay, your camera gear's up there in the woods. We'll see you next week. And they would come out once a week and swap our batteries and take our footage and take off again. And so I walk up in this forest, and it is dense. Cedar trees don't rot. Every time a cedar tree falls in the Pacific Northwest, it just lays there for 100 years. So it's like pickup sticks, all through this forest. I had this idea, this vision in my head. I was going to make a boreal forest lean-to with a raised bed and all this stuff, and all my trees are like 12 feet in diameter. They're just huge. It's like It's like camping in the giant redwoods. Empire Strikes Back, and that's the kind of the forest it looked like, just these gigantic, massive trees. And they're so huge that I can't even see what kind of trees they are because the trunks are covered with moss, and then the needles are so high up in the sky, I didn't even know what kind of trees they were. I have a water up here. Melanie is so much cuter than Doug. Just gotta say. So I find, it was Patton who said, a good plan executed right now with violence is better than the perfect plan 10 minutes too late. And I get in the forest, and first thing off, I find this patch of moss that's kind of raised up off the forest floor there. They're on like a little hummock of land, but it's relatively flat. And I said, okay, that's where, that's the spot I'm gonna spend the night if I can't find anything better. And I searched all through this area. I could not find anything better. So I made my shelter there. That night I had shelter, fire, and water. I had I located a source of water. I put up my shelter, expedient tarp shelter, and I made my first fire and boiled my first pot of water, and I was doing good. 6 days later, it was 6 days of really hard-fought work, 12-hour days, just figuring out what things were in that cove and where the food was. I saw no fish. I'm looking in the ocean, and there's just nothing. It's just pebble bottom, clear water, pebbles, and bull kelp. Swimming. Bull kelp's a big. It's edible. The beach was covered with bull kelp, huge, big, fat wads of rotting bull kelp, and it had this real pungent, horrible, rotty, seafoody kind of smell to it. And I'm thinking, okay, that's like the only edible vegetable I'm seeing here, and this stuff smelled so horrific. I just couldn't bring myself. Just the slimy masses of bull kelp, and I'd pull a fresh one out of the water and look at it, and they had the same kind of smell. It wasn't the same, didn't have the same power factor as the rotting stuff, but I couldn't bring myself to eat it. And I'm seeing nothing. Finally, on day 6, I remember it was the first day that I took a break from all the hard work, and I sat down on this rock and I realized, wow, Lord, you have now taken everything from me. 2 days before I went to Vancouver Island, I was taking my guns over Gene's house, and so he could take care of them while I was gone. And my Jeep got rear-ended and totaled. I had lost my job. My daughter moved into my apartment. I had spent all the last of my money on gear to go to the show. I had nothing, and I realized, Lord, you have now exiled me to the north end of nowhere, and taken away everything. What do I have left? I have a backpack full of gear, a forest, and you. That's it. And you've put me in a place now where you could take my life or you could take my health. And I'm okay with that, because this life belongs to you anyway. And you've had me on this track for a long time. You have literally taken away everything that I've ever valued in my life. And I said on the show, who are you when everything's been stripped away? When everything you've looked for a sense of life or purpose or meaning is simply gone. And that's, God will never give you more than you can handle. No, he will. Why does he do that, though? Because he wants to teach you something. We are strongest on our knees. We are strongest when we are in dependence on him. And as men, that's the last thing we want to be, is dependent, right? Well, I'm a man, and a man does it on his own. And like I said at the beginning, it's easy to take a guy like, this guy, he spent 66 days, he did it all by himself, We want to be that guy, but it's not realistic. It's not right. And God will take you to the very end of yourself. He will take you to the very precipice of your life. He will cut your knees out from under you to show you that you can't depend upon yourself. You have to depend upon him. And that if you do depend upon him, that you are far stronger and you can do far more. And who gets the glory then? God does. God will not pour out his strength on a man and give you all the strength that you need to go through whatever battle you are facing. He doesn't do that in the beginning. He doesn't just hand you all that strength. And if he did, our own egos, we would latch onto that. We'd say, yeah, look what I did. I handled that. I didn't handle my time on that island. I didn't win this thing because I was strong. I won it because I was weak. And I know I was weak. And as a weak man, I know where to find strength, because there's strength available for this. I learned some very interesting things while I was out there. Actually, relearned or reconfirmed some things, which I had actually learned as a missionary in Brazil. After that day, that 6 days, I had to crack the food code. I had to 13 days without catching a fish. That's embarrassing, isn't it? I mean, out in the woods, out there on this beautiful seacoast, 13 days, I never even saw any fish. I'm trying to catch fish. I'm trying to set my gill net. The very first thing I did was to make a second gill net. There's two ways to survive in the wilderness. You have active fishing and hunting and passive fishing and hunting. And the idea is to get as much automatic fish gathering infrastructure up as possible with nets and trout lines and bank lines and, long lines, anything you can do to get hooks in the water and get fish. Those things are fishing for you while you're sleeping in your shelter. And then during the day, when you can, actively hunt and fish and look for wild plants and things like that. So you have these two-pronged approach of the active and the passive. And I started setting up all kinds of passive. I set up my gill net. I actually made a second gill net by hand out of a dead rope I found. I took it all apart and wove a gill net out of it. And I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, working that two-pronged approach. But 13 days before I actually caught my first fish, it was embarrassing. Now I'd eaten eels and little tiny crabs and tried to find certain things. But once I started catching fish, I started catching fish consistently. And at the same time that I was getting better and better at actively fishing, every passive fishing system I put in that water was just defeated. There was so much bull kelp. Every time I throw a hook in that water and leave it overnight, the bull kelp would come by and grab that hook and tear it out, and I'd lose my hook. I lost 7 hooks in the first 2 weeks and only had 25 of them. So I could not do that. My gill net, oh my goodness. On season 1, these guys were eating out of their gill nets daily. You guys know what a gill net is, right? How it works. Basically, you got some, mesh size that's kind of large, and a fish gets in there. He gets past his gill plate, and they get stuck. At least that's the theory. I was catching a lot of bull kelp. All that bull kelp in that water was winding up in my net, and I had made a second net. And about day 30, I was coming to the conclusion, we're about a month in here, I'd lost 25 pounds by the first weigh-in, which was week 3. So I lost 25 pounds in 3 weeks. And I had made this second gill net, and I tied it up to my other commercial gill net, and I put that up, and I'd mounted that gill net in 5 different places, trying to find a place where it wouldn't get clogged with bull kelp or torpedoed by logs. No dice, it just wasn't happening. And one morning I came out, I had the thing set up, it was a rocky part of my beach there. There's a big rock wall, and I had the net set up here to a tripod with a huge rock tied to it. And I get up in the morning, and that tripod had collapsed, and the surf rolling back and forth had just bound the net up in those 3 poles. And I get out there, and I'm frustrated, I did not swear on camera that I recall, but I kept it real, okay? There was a couple times out there that was one of those mornings. I walk up and I see this thing is just completely destroyed and it is totally tangled. And I'm like, oh, I just wanted to rip the thing out and throw it through the freaking hole in the forest and just forget about it. And I go and I pick this net up, and what do you think's in the middle of that net all wrapped up? This giant northern kelp crab. I mean, he's like, oh, I am crab, see me roar. I mean, he's like these gigantic claws and everything. And I'm like, I'm too cheap to just take my knife out and just cut that net and free the thing, right? I got to untangle the net. And as I'm untangling this net, it just became a metaphor for my life, that all these people started coming back to me. And it's like, here I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and the storms of life are just tearing me to shreds, and I'm getting nowhere. And there were people that I blamed. When you go into ketosis, when you stop eating, your body starts ejecting all the toxins. Nothing coming in, so it gets rid of all that stuff which is stored in. And you get this massive headache, and all your junk is coming out of your body. And your mind does that when you're in isolation. When you're not around people, several interesting things happen. First of all, the music would not shut off in my head. Okay, I could not shut off the music. When I was practicing making gill net in my apartment, before I left, I was listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. And I'm out there in the bush, I'm doing the thing, and the music started playing. I'm not talking the song, I'm talking the entire album on endless loop. And they say, everything has a good side and a bad side in life, except for Pink Floyd albums. They just have 2 good sides, right? So that's all right. So You can tell I'm a recovered Baptist, right? Psychologically, things had to change, but I remember, I'm getting off track here. Undoing that gill net, it became just a metaphor for my life, and all kinds of people started coming in. All the junk which I had suppressed, all those people which I thought had done me wrong, and actually a lot of them that I thought I had forgiven, just kept coming back. And I was angry at some of these people. I was upset about some of these people. You know, there were people out there that God had to stop me from killing. You know, and that's the severity of some of the things that had gone on, and they're coming back. And I had to deal with this. And as a believer, I knew I had to forgive them. And one by one, as these people came up, I just forgave them. And it was like almost like the Lord said, okay, you've had this 40-day fast, and by that it was only 40 days, and it wasn't a total fast, but it had very much the same effect. You've had this fast. Eat your crab. Be happy. I remember eating that crab. I made a big production. I filmed eating that big crab and everything. And I said to myself, I said, Lord, when I get out of this place, I'm going to one of them all-you-can-eat crab places, and I'm just going to pig out on these things because they are amazing. And a couple days later, I'm out there fishing. It's in the evening, a really nice evening. I'm fishing. I'm looking through the water at the bottom, looking for fish passing by. And I'm sitting there fishing, and over here, I see this thing moving. I look over, and there's a crab. One of these northern kelp crabs, and he's rolled over on his back. Now, I'm colorblind. I can't see them if they're face down. They're very hard for me to see. I never noticed them in the kelp. And I was seeing this crab, so I started looking, and there was like 12 of them all out there on top of the kelp. So I'm like throwing a limpet on them. Oh yeah, my limpet was my bait. And they grab on, and then they grab onto the limpet. Greedy little guys. I mean, they're like this. And then they'd hook into the kelp. And I'm pulling and like this, trying to get him out. And I get frustrated, and I stopped fighting him. And all of a sudden, he stopped fighting me. It's like, he let go. Flew him right up into the rocks. They go guns up. Okay, what are you doing, you know? Break them all up. I caught 6 of them that evening. I had my all-you-can-eat crab feast. I go back. I mean, it's just like God heard me. He's like, yeah, we can do that out here. You don't have to go home, you know. There's lots of crabs out there. So I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I can do this. You know, I started eating well. I was catching fish. I had 2 places that I would fish. The first place was my reef out in the high tide. The tide is like at times like 10, 12 feet there. There's really massive tides. And when the high tide was in, it was all the way up to my forest. I couldn't even get out of the forest. A little tiny beach in the front of my cove. And then as the tide would go out, I have at times maybe 30 yards of beach out there. It was quite 30, 40 yards of beach, and I could get around. And I started going out on the reef, and that's where I first started catching fish on day 13. I figured out when the tide gets lower, there's 2 channels I had to jump across to get out onto this reef, and I had to watch because as the tide came in, I could have got stuck out there. So I learned every fishing spot that I could get to on that reef, and there's a big kelp forest out there, and on the edge of the reef, I could get to the edge of that kelp forest, and it was just dynamite fishing. There's 2 kinds of fish I would eat. Kelp greenling, which are extremely aggressive fish. They're great. I love kelp greenling. The other ones were striped sea perch. I called them pinstripe kissy fish because I had no idea the names of any of these fish out there. But these sea perch, they're big fish, and they come up and they see the limpet, and it's like, oh, I'd eat that, but I'm a vegetarian, And they actually are. I found out later they actually are. They're mainly vegetarian, and yeah, they don't really go for limpets. So they'll come up and just fooling with you, Oh, I hated those fish. Every time I got one, I snagged him in the face. Seriously, I'd be watching. It's like, it's got you little under the jaw. So the fishing slowed down on my reef, and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't really know much about the fish there. Maybe they don't circulate. Maybe I'm just catching all the local fish, and I'm just going to fish this place out. And on the west side of my cove, northwest side of my cove, if I go around that side, it came to cliffs. And I'd been there many, many times, and I could never get past those cliffs. It was just, there's no way to do it. And one day I'm on the reef, I'm thinking, I've never been over there at dead low tide. I've never seen those rocks at dead low tide. So tomorrow we're going to forego fishing, forego the shore thing, fishing on the reef, and I'm going to work my around the cove as the tide's going down, and we'll see how far I can get at dead low tide. And sure enough, as the tide's going down, all of a sudden this real rocky channel opens up, and I could get through this cleft in the rocks, and I came to this place. It was really good fishing. I caught a great big sea perch there. I called that place the Fight Chair. And as the tide got lower and lower and lower, all of a sudden this little trail opened up around the cliffs at the bottom. And all of a sudden I had 300, 400 yards of prime habitat. And that was when I realized, okay, I just got to raise. This thing is doable. And there comes a time when you're out there where you're going to think, you're going to crunch the numbers. Okay, you've got the weight loss, and my weight had stabilized. I'd stopped losing weight. And then how much margin you have. I had a 2-week supply of food, 20 gallons of fresh water at all times in my rain catch. I had a raised bed I had made with a foot-thick hemlock mattress. I spent half my time out there sleeping, or at least laying down. I mean, if you're not gonna, you don't spend energy you can't replace. In a long-term wilderness survival situation, you have to get as much as you can out of that landscape and also conserve and not waste energy. I didn't have fires at night because why? Because cutting firewood cost energy. And it would have depleted my stock of firewood in the area. I was using cedar driftwood. So by the time I opened up that Northwest Passage, I called it, that changed everything for me. I go out there the very first day. I go running up there. I left the camera. I didn't want to film. I left the camera there just so I could explore this place. I'll come back tomorrow and film or whatever. And I find a tide pool. And there's it's like the size of a small swimming pool. And I look in there and there's 6 of those northern kelp crabs in there. Well, yeah, baby. I'm pulling out these crabs. I got all 6 of them. There's no more crabs in that pool. Before I left, I grabbed a bunch of mussels. And the mussels were poisonous, the red tide poison. We couldn't eat them. So I got a bunch of mussels and I crushed them all up and like a gallon of these mussels, and I threw them in that tide pool. Came back the next day, 5 more crabs. Ka-ching, it's like a slot machine for crabs. It was, as long as I throw poisonous mussels in there, I get these sweet and delicious crabs. It was great. So fishing crabs and bull kelp, or to shake it up, bull kelp, crabs, and fish. That's pretty much how I was doing things. And I got to the point where I realized I'm doing well. I fell into a routine. And I learned some things. I can dwell on the past and the hurts of the past and take that pain and bring it into our right now, which is really okay. How crazy that is. For me to think of all the things that were done to me in Brazil or done to my family in Brazil, and to take that into a right now, which is really not that bad. I mean, we get a day off, we go fishing, right? Get a day off, you go hunting. Here I am on Vancouver Island, in the most beautiful place I've ever been. Yeah, I'm starving to death. Yeah, it's brutal and all that, but who gets a chance to do this stuff? You know what I mean? Why would I take that pain from my past and bring it into a right now, which is really okay? Or why would I worry about the future and go off to some imaginary day, which God never planned for me, and take that pain and bring it into a right now and start living that anxiety right now in this place? You know what? Now is okay. Now is a pretty cool time. There's a lot of things you can do with your right now. Right now is the only time you can make a decision. Right now is the only time you can act. And my mantra out there was make tomorrow an easier day. I started out with these bold predictions on camera. This is what I'm planning to do today. Boom, 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 boom. I list my objectives. At the end of the day, none of them had happened. And a lot of reasons for that. It's a new environment. I've got this massive fatigue. I am totally, boy, I'm going to be hydrated here. I tell you what. Maybe they're saying, drink water. Is my breath that bad? Can you smell from here now? I learned some things out there about myself and about my God. To live in the now, to abide in Christ, to admit to myself that I do not have the strength to do this. That verse there, go ahead and put that one up. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do, read that last word with me, nothing. Not a pretty good job. Not even mediocre. Apart from me, you can do nothing. You want to argue with Jesus on that point? I don't. It's part of that thing I call active dependence, where I got to do all the man stuff, but God's got to do all the God stuff, right? I'm not God. I'm a man. God doesn't want me to starve to death, but I've got to fry the eggs, right? There is that divine human cooperation that has to happen. God doesn't want me to starve to death, but I got to get out of this bed and go out into that cove and fish all day long, and maybe I'll catch a fish, maybe I won't. I prayed a lot out there. You know, the fisherman's prayer. Let him bite, let him bite, let him bite. I prayed a lot out there. I noticed something that as soon as, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the lowest unmet need motivates. If you don't have food, you don't think about how much you're missing your kids. The only objective on your mind is food, food, food. That's the only thing you could think about. And as soon as I would get food, all of a sudden I think, man, I miss my kids. First couple times that happened, it really took me by surprise. Then it became a pattern. And I realized, okay, I just pray for my kids when I'm missing my kids. I knew the whole thing was a parenthetical situation. There was a parenthesis. It had a starting point, it had a stopping point. I personally thought that stopping point was going to be a serious injury. I knew I was doing well. I knew there was no reason for me to tap out. I never once hovered over that button because I knew that God was taking care of me, and it became obvious that he was taking care of me. In that second month, I had so much more energy and so much more to eat, and I got good at it. It was kind of like I'd get up, go to work, fish all day, come home, cook my dinner, and watch TV. I'd open up my camera and turn it around and watch the footage that I'd shot during the day. Go to bed, get up tomorrow morning, do it again. Day after day after day after day. And then day 66 rolled around. Go ahead and play that other video. I wake up and it's really, really cold. Sitting out in the sunshine, trying to get warm. And I'm thinking, God, if they don't pull me out of here today, you're gonna have to encourage me, because I'm ready for this thing to be done. I stay with it one day at a time. And I keep that focus one day at a time. I don't try it and think about how long I've been here or how long I could possibly be here. Good job. Right now, I feel like I'm coming out of the tunnel. I feel like this thing is coming to a logical conclusion at some point.
104/72 is your heart rate, blood pressure. Sorry.
I mean, I can't stay out here forever. I miss my kids, amazing, really bad. I mean, I try not to think about my kids, and but I know that they love me. I know that they want me to be out here as long as I can.
Day 66, dude.
Wow.
So why are you staying here so long anyways? Is it
Why
you
not?
wanna win?
Yeah, I would love to win this thing. Of all the people that get a chance to do this thing, I get a chance to do it. Of all the people that applied for this thing and maybe got a chance to do it, I get to do it. So yeah, I want to do this. Why go home now? I'm eating crab. I am eating Dungeness crabs practically every night. Why would I go home now? So.
You've been doing it a long time out here. You're doing a good job. I mean, it's work out here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Worth it?
Yeah. It's, at 50 years old, to be able to do this for this long,
And somebody said to me right before I left, boy, 50 hasn't slowed you down at all. And I'm like, yeah, baby. You know, that's what. Oh. I did this for you guys, you know that, right? Oh my goodness. I did it.
You did it.
You came all this way, just tell me. Oh my goodness.
I wouldn't miss this for the world.
I get to go in that boat today, don't I?
You're coming home.
I get to come home. Oh my goodness.
You get to come home.
Wow, $500,000. I don't even know what to do with it. I wouldn't even know. I'm pretty enthusiastic about figuring it out.
Yeah.
You know, no, there's some things I want to do to help you guys, and yeah, beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I just have to feel my way through that, survive that.
Goodbye, Desolation Cove. What a perfect ending to a beautiful day. I gotta admit, I did not expect today to be ending like this. Oh wow, this is so cool. Gotta admit, I did not picture myself leaving in a helicopter. First helicopter ride ever. You know, I don't have to stand over that chopping block splitting wood tonight for my dinner. Oh my goodness, it feels so good to know everything's going to be okay. I get to go home. Everyone's at home's okay. You know, to see you again and just to know that I get to stop doing all that. This week was just like, it's just humbling, really humbling.
And that's how it ended. Now, people always ask me, what was the first thing you ate? You know, when they told me I'd won, and I looked right at the camera and I quoted that verse from Isaiah. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Youths will grow weary and young men will stumble and fall, but those that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings of eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not grow faint. And I said, that's the truth, and that's how I did this thing. I was dependent on God every day. I remember several times, making a fire one night. I never had a problem with fire. And I tried to make a fire, it burned out. Tried to rebuild it, tried to make another one, burned out. Tried to make another one, same, rebuild it, and it burned out. And I remember screaming an expletive very loudly, split the forest with profanity, and all of a sudden got convicted. And that is not quiet dependence on God. That is me taking care of things in my own strength and failing. That's all that is. And I said, Lord, could you please just make this fire for me? And I did it, and it worked. Every night after that, Lord, I am so bone tired. Could you please just make this fire for me? And now he didn't just make it. The fire didn't just magically appear. I had to split the wood. I had to do the whole thing. And I did. At the end, he was giving me meals every day. I was humbled by the fact I was throwing, 3 fish and a couple crabs on this log every day and photographing the catch of the day and eating big pots of fish and crab stew. There was one night I had, a 2-quart pot. It was filled with, 1 quart solid packed of fish fillet, filleted fish, and it was so much food I could barely eat it. It was just an amazingly humbling thing. Everyone always asks, what's the first thing I ate when I got out? The one thing I remember more than anything else is when I got to the cabin, after they landed that helicopter at the cabin, there was a jar of organic crunchy peanut butter. Gentlemen, this was like crack cocaine. I'm like, I ate that entire jar in 2 days. Big jar of peanut butter I ate in 2 days. Anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I'll leave you with one last verse. Put that last verse up here. No, not that one. Yes. To this end, I strenuously contend with all the energy Christ so powerfully works in me. Okay? That right there sums up that divine human cooperation. To this end, I strenuously contend with all of the energy Christ so powerfully works in me. We have to do our job as men. We do not do our job alone. If you do your job alone, you're going to fail. If you depend upon him and upon each other, and get yourself into a small group. You can't handle it on your own. You're not supposed to handle it on your own, okay? I didn't, so don't hold me up as the poster child for the guy who did it alone. Hold me up as the poster child for the men's ministry at this church, because they're the ones who saved me from a load of error, okay? Well, gentlemen, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And it is 9:50 at night. Y'all got to get home to your families, right? Thank you.